We started the, every time I say we started the video recording, it comes right in like clockwork. Welcome everyone. This is the Penn One Board of Supervisors meeting, January 18th, 2021. And we will do a roll call to order. First is Claudio Campuzano.
Present.
Thank you, Claudio. Annalisa Kohler.
Present.
Thank you, Annalisa. Jeff Noodleman.
Here.
Great, thank you, Jeff. And I think PJ is on vacation.
Yes.
With that, we have 4 out of 5 attending, and we have a quorum. We can move on then to item number B, public testimony.
Don't have any expected.
None today, thank you. Item C, finance and contracts report. Jim?
I'd like to turn that over to Janet Olson, who is here today to give you that update.
Okay. Would it help if I shared the reports, or do all the board members have them in front of them?
I've got mine, but probably sharing is useful for everybody.
Yeah, I've got mine, but it's up to you. I mean, sharing is
Okay.
helpful, but you know, what you can point
Well,
out stuff that I might need.
The first report that you see in the board packet is the contract report for December 2021. And this will show the new contracts that were written in December. We report these at every board meeting for you guys. So we only had 3 new ones. Looks like it was Crypto Creative, Winterbrook Planning, and Cascadia Behavioral Health Care. Is there any questions about any of those contracts or anything that we can answer? And they have the dollar amount over in the far right column. Anything? Okay, we can move on then. The next report, you'll see that there is a year-to-date financial report, and Ben has been very gracious about, he put all this together so that this is a real easy one to pull that shows the 1920 actuals, and then last year's 2021 actual, and then where we are this year, and then with this year's budget and the budget remaining, which is pretty informative, I think, so that you can kind of get an idea where we were last year, or the last 2 years, I should say. As you can tell that right now our budget, as far as assessment revenue, we have collected all but about 14%. That all comes through the county tax roll. The total service contract revenue, we've still got quite a bit left in that. That again is with the city of Portland for a lot of projects that they are helping us fund, as well as a special appropriation grant. So anyway, so materials and services, we've got still 64% of our budget available to spend. Everything looks like it's on track. We don't seem to, there's really nothing to be too concerned about. So that's kind of it. Any questions or anything that I can help answer?
I'll do it. I'm just going to say thanks to our partners for filling the gap between assessments and needs. So to the city of Portland, Port Portland Metro, thank you.
So this is Claudio. I just had a quick question. Assessment revenue, do you normally collect on the same schedule as all tax revenues? City of Portland typically sees about 90% in through December. So I was wondering if that was an issue of concern, or if you guys have a different seasonal pattern.
No, it's about the same. So, we'll be receiving deposits every month from here on out, but the bulk of it is always from November through December. And we don't have any direct bills for Penn One. So that's the majority of it.
Thank you, Janet. One quick question. Obviously, we have quite a lot unspent in expenditures. I assume that's tied to the IGA work through City of Portland. And so our low spending correlates with either work not being completed yet or work that's completed but it hasn't been billed for yet, and kind of tied to that second
Yes.
line in the revenue, on the revenue side, service contract revenue. Is that
Yes.
the takeaway?
Right. Now, this report only reflects expenses through December 31st. Okay. And I will be billing the city of Portland for new projects by the end of this month. So, and we're doing that on a quarterly basis now.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I guess lastly at this point, I didn't hear anything from you or from Ben in terms of red flags here, anything to be concerned about in terms of trend.
Not that we can see, no. Ben, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
I don't see any red flags. Yeah, I don't see any issues.
Yeah, it's pretty standard. We're only halfway through the year. So, we've got a lot of work that's going to start kicking off in the spring. Mowing and a lot of the herbicides, there's a lot of different work that is more seasonal. So you'll start seeing some of those expenses come through.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from board members? Okay, great. Well, thank you for that update. Moving on to item D, Portland Metro Levee Study, PED cost share. Mark?
Thanks, James. I'm going to let Jamie kick us off, and I'm going to share my screen.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, James. So good afternoon, board members. I'm Jamie Damon. I'm familiar face to all of you, I would hope. We've been working together to support a number of PMLS related topics over the last year. I'm with Kearns and West. So we've got a little mini agenda for our time with you today. And I think we have about a half hour total. Thanks, Mark. So really three topics that we want to chat with you about. One is we've got some project updates of the PMLS project, kind of where we're at since the last time we met. And then the focus of our conversation today is on a staff recommendation for the cost allocation for PED. And then we want to just wrap it up with a few next steps with that big colorful rainbow schedule, so you can just see where we are and what's coming up next. So we'll go ahead and start with project updates. And I'm going to kick that over to Mark with saying a few things about where we are with the federal state advocacy and the City of Portland MOU. Mark?
Great. Well, thanks, Jamie. And again, good afternoon to everyone. Things keep moving along, and I am tickled that we're making such progress on things. So as far as advocacy work, I just kind of wanted to provide an update that work by the congressional delegation showing their support and lobbying for or asking for support from the for the core feasibility study. Follow-on work is pushing ahead aggressively. Senators Wyden, Merkley, and Congressman Blumenauer and DeFazio requested that the Corps fund all 3.5 years of PED all at once, and that they are requesting funding be made available through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So that's a very positive note. So we have that mechanism as well as the WRDA mechanism to try to get this work, this very important PED work, on their work plan. And also Jim has been is expected to present to the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee. I don't know if Jim, you would like to elaborate on that or any of the other delegation support.
Just want to thank Evan and Julie Minerva for the great work keeping the delegation informed. We've got a lot of support, and would just say Chair DeFazio, reached out to us saying he wanted to help, and also called Curtis Robinhold, the Port's executive director, saying, "What can I do?" So we're going to take advantage of that, and we're optimistic that the feds are going to invest in our fun project.
Yeah, it's a lot of great work that's been done to set the groundwork for set the tone for all the support at both the federal level and at the state level. And we'll be talking here very shortly about the state level support through the state levy grant. As far as the city of Portland, several of MOU and task force. For those of you who don't know, the MOU that sets up this task force between the city and the drainage districts within the city of Portland has been signed by all bureau directors, and we are moving ahead. We're on about meeting 3. We've generally kept it to, there's a lot of catching up and a lot of ensuring that we're all speaking about on the same sheet of music. So we haven't encountered any major decisions yet, but we're identifying issues, and in the subsequent weeks, we will be starting to provide updates at future board meetings based on recommendations that come out of those discussions. I think everybody knows this will be recommendations for sharing of resources, in-kind resources, as well as financial, and just coming to agreement on the process and making sure that the Corps has the means and the scope during PED to address those critical issues that are near and dear to everyone. Items such as real estate, items such as major construction within residential areas, that sort of thing. So we will provide more updates at future format and individual board meetings. And certainly if you have any questions about particular topics, or if you want to tee any particular issues up ahead of time, the city task force, which James is a part of, can just bring those up for us. We're working on agendas a couple of weeks out, and those meetings are bi-weekly. That's about all I had on that. I'll give it back to you, Jamie.
All right, thank you. And so, as we've said, there have been partner meetings happening all along. The big one with the city of Portland, but there are also conversations occurring that Jim will refer to a little bit later in our presentation with the port and with Metro and with other partners. So those conversations continue. And then just a reminder, we shared this at the last board meeting, but it's really worth repeating. If you haven't checked out the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers website, the project page is very detailed, quite in depth. I mean, the whole report is there, all the background information, lots of great maps. And so it's really worth reminding everybody that this is a wonderful resource, especially as we're getting closer and closer to the project actually starting. It would be great to spend a little bit of time just poking around on this website. So I just wanted to bring that back up. So I think those are all our project updates. And then we're going to go ahead and move to the next agenda item, which is the cost allocation. And so when Colin and Mark and Evan and I, when we're putting our heads together, thinking through, kind of where we are and where we've been with this discussion, it occurred to all of us that, we've been bringing this topic forward to all of you for over a year. We made presentations at your January board meetings a year ago about this, when we didn't have a lot of information and we were just kind of noodling around about different ways to figure out what the cost allocation could look like and those methodologies and what the costs actually were. And since that time, we've gotten a lot better information. We've gotten a lot of great input from all of you in our conversations. And we're at a place now we're ready to make a staff recommendation. And so that's where we are today, is we've got a recommendation to put forward and have some conversation with all of you about that. And so, but before I hand it off to Mark with the drum roll and the details, and you've seen this in your memo too, there's just a couple of reminder slides we wanted to put up of some good context. So Mark, you want to go ahead? There you go. So just a reminder, these are the PED costs. These numbers haven't changed. That we're looking for an estimated 4.16 million is required from the districts, which is a 35% cost share for the first 2 years of PED. You can see in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, how those numbers start to go down and what that looks like over time. And so this is information we've brought forward, but it's good context to remind you all. And then if you're going to go to the next slide. And then as you recall, we've been spending a lot of time trying to figure out, sort of what the options are to help fund your allocation share. And we had all of these different revenue options that staff has been exploring on the table. And we've got some exciting news to share with all of you about kind of where we are with the state levy grant fund. And so we want to give you an update on that, because we've got a lot more information there. We've got better information around the partner contributions as a result of discussions that we've been having. And then Ben, what is Ben's title, Mark?
Budget
Ben.
manager.
Budget manager, thank you. I was saying finance guru, Ben, I don't know. So Ben, your budget manager, he's got a presentation to share with you after this presentation about just kind of taking a deeper dive within each of the district's budgets and what the options are for you in terms of funding PED, depending on whether or not grant funds come forward. There you go, Mark. And so this is all the options that we've been talking with you about. We've had different levels of certainty and uncertainty about these different options, and we're getting better information, and we're more clear now on what we can propose in a package. So I think that tees up to you, Mark, for our next slide.
Well, actually, I'll key it over to Colin's going to help wade through some of the new information on Business Oregon.
Yeah, so updates since the last meeting. We've continued to meet with individual district board members to address any outstanding issues. And then staff has met with Business Oregon, and Colin has a slide to share with you some more about that. And then I did mention that your budget manager, Ben, will be having a presentation after this one about the better understanding of the revenue picture for each district in the current and 5-year projection. So let me bump back up to the Business Oregon grant and hand it over to Colin.
Thanks, Jamie. Just wanted to give an update on where we have been able to move the conversation around the Business Oregon levy grant funding. And just as a quick reminder, this Business Oregon grant opportunity came out of the Business Oregon levy sub-account that Levee Ready Columbia, the drainage districts, as well as partners around the state helped create during the 2015 legislative session. That was specifically to fund levee modernization efforts and recertification efforts. And it was recognized, while that was a great fund and having that set aside just for levies was helpful, it was recognized that this statewide issue bears more funding from the state. And so during the 2019 session, we advocated to change the loan fund into a grant fund. And so that is what we are currently discussing with Business Oregon. Since we had our last set of board meetings, we've met with Business Oregon, I think 3 or 4 times. And so just a review of what this grant opportunity looks like. In total, it's a $15 million fund. That fund, only 40% of the 15 million can go to urban levy districts. So that's $6 million. There's only really our levy system and then some levies in or near Eugene, Springfield, and Salem, Kaiser. And so there's, most of the other levy systems around the state are in the rural category. So each district can request up to $2 million. Obviously, we have to calibrate our request based on the fact that there's only $6 million that can be requested. And so if you go to the next slide, Mark, we have really great news, I think, overall, and a really good plan. And that's what you're going to see in the staff recommendation as far as a funding option. And so what we've been able to work out with Business Oregon is a process to get conditional approval in time for your budgeting, as well as in time for October of this year for the funding that Army Corps of Engineers need. And so what we'll be doing is we're going to fill out the basic intake forms, which basically says how much money we need and gives the details of the project. We're going to do that at the end of this month. And our regional development officer will be bringing that to internal decision makers at the very end of January. So that's sort of the go, no-go process. And so we'll be able to report back after that. We hope and have intention that that will get the thumbs up for the full application. And so we'll need to complete those by mid-March. And we're already, our regional development officer has already requested for us to be on the Infrastructure Finance Authority Board's agenda for April 1st. And so at that meeting, they would be able to provide conditional approval. And the reason why it's conditional is that the bond sale doesn't take place until after that meeting, but that gives enough time based on their meeting schedule as well as our budget schedule to give that conditional approval and begin the contracting process that would be needed so that we can have a contract awarded this summer. So it's all very positive, and I think we're working really well with Business Oregon. In talking with them, we're the only urban levee districts that have shown any interest in it. There's a number of rural districts, and to be clear, we want as many of these funds to go out the door. Business Oregon is committed to that. It really supports levee projects around the state. We want to continue building capacity of other districts as well as ours. And it also looks good as far as subsequent requests that we're going to need to make to the legislature that these funds are in high demand. So we're looking to maximize our request, and that is what Mark will talk through in the next slide.
Great. Thanks, Colin. Yeah, it's been very exciting because I think it's been no surprise that as we've gotten more information, we have a lot more confidence in our approach. Early on, there was a lot of decisions to be made and a lot of options, a lot of pathways, a lot of pitfalls. But with this renewed information and these from these discussions with Business Oregon, it's really just hard to overstate just our level of confidence in the state levy grant program and the opportunity it affords us. And so how clear a recommendation we need to provide. So so I put some numbers up there. If we move forward with the state levy grant and ask for the maximum amount available, we need 4.16 million for the first 2 years of PED. This is a biennial grant program, so wherever we're at in the process of integrating the districts, when we get at the end of those 2 years, we can decide to apply for more funds, but or not. But for the first 2 years, which are 74.3% of PED, we need $4.16 million. So that's if you account for the 20% cost share, that's 3.3 million for this PED ask, and that leaves $208,000 for the 2 first years of PED for each district. I'm going to show you the handy table that I've already shared with you through our memo. But when you heard me say $208,000 per district, that's because for this Plan A, we are proposing to use an equal allocation method. We've been talking about a lot of different methods, but for this purpose, we're trying to be able to ask for the maximum amount of grant funding available per district. So there's a lot of different allocation methods that would actually make it more difficult to ask for equal funding for all 4 districts. So so that's our recommendation. We do understand that $208,000 for Pen 1 is still a significant amount of money, and that will require financial contributions from partner jurisdictions, including the city, the Port of Portland, and Metro. But I think many of you are aware that we've already engaged in these discussions with the city, both offhand and through the MOU task force, and the Port and Metro. Sorry, looks like Jeff, you have a question.
Thanks. You didn't have to stop. I love the way you were laying it out. I appreciate your well thought out presentation. My question though, since you stopped, where the bullet point where it says the equal allocation method would allow for maximum funding requests from this source, what's that based on? I guess, we could all, speculate, or you guys probably have the nuts and bolts as to all the other many potential other allocation methods, but what was the data point that you arrived at that this equal allocation method is going to allow for the maximum funding?
Well, first I'll share that that there is plenty of money for all 4 districts to make the maximum ask. You know, as we said in the earlier slide, we can ask for up to $2 million. We actually don't need that much if we're just asking for funds for PED. But obviously, if the 4 districts made their grant requests based on some sort of proportional allocation method, then that might undermine what, you know, a maximum request might undermine another district's ability to ask for the maximum amount. And so we, in splitting the cost equally, we can all still ask for the maximum share without engaging in any discussion over the needs and benefits proportional to each district.
So that obviously then requires each district to be aligned with this concept.
Yeah, and I think when you see the numbers, Jeff, you'll see that this will be a pretty easy lift. I think the numbers that we're sharing are substantially lower than we were forecasting without the state levy grant, and so and I'll talk about what kind of allocation method we're proposing for the Plan B.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Yeah, so and just to finish up, I think I started to dive into, I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail because some of the discussions are still in the early stages, but we obviously we know that Pen 1 needs assistance in both this method in this plan and as well as Plan B, and so we've been engaging our partners in those discussions proportional to their level of interest in the district. So, and I also want to recognize, obviously, the city of Portland has made some pretty substantial contributions to support the ongoing operations, as well as some of our upcoming projects, such as the Pen 1 pump station. So we you know, to much to our chagrin, we keep going back to the city of Portland, but obviously it's a really important asset for all of us, this system. So okay, so again, just my little plug and my little reminder that the first 2 years are 74% of the PED costs. So this grant's really, I hate to say it, but it is kind of a silver bullet. And I think Colin and Evan have done a great job of checking and rechecking with Business Oregon. And I've pinched myself when they've come back from those meetings, but we have a high level of confidence. That said, I'm going to unveil the numbers and then we'll talk about Plan B. So these numbers are in your memo. You can peruse them. They're pretty straightforward. Even Stephen, the 5.6 million, I'll just reiterate, has a 25% contingency as well as cost escalation for the duration of PED. So the Corps will give us a better estimate this summer, but this is a pretty solid number. There was one point when they gave us a slightly lower number, and we said, you know, we're gonna stick to this, factor everything in, and we don't have to go to the boards with a higher number. So we hope that's true, and the Corps is going to do a more exact versus the parametric estimate that they did to arrive at this number. But so these are the numbers. The distribution. The difference in numbers between year 1 and year 2 is that $2.3 million is going to be the projected ask from the Corps of Engineers for year 1, and year 2 just simply is not going to cost as much, and so everything changes proportionally around that. But we will be asking for the maximum amount available, given that 20% cost share, which is about $3.3 million. So what if our forecast that we get this grant doesn't work? We need to have a backup plan. So we're presenting our backup plan after much consideration and deliberation, and the context of the future district integration and considering like debt service moving forward. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I'm going to leave Ben to talk about the specific details as far as your assessment revenue and your reserves and other means. But should we go to Plan B and not have this windfall of cash to fund PED, we've provided the numbers to you, and we've done this in the context of that composite allocation method that we've talked about. We've arrived at the conclusion that this is the best fit. It realizes the difference in costs and benefits to the various districts. In the case of Pen 1 and Pen 2, under the project cost method, they would shoulder a higher burden, and it would not recognize the benefits that MCDD receives, for instance. And so this composite method sort of fairly allocates that, attributes some of those economic benefits to MCDD in its share. So it's much more flat distribution, and we think it is the fairest and the most easily defensible and explainable. So that is the method that we are recommending moving forward. So again, Plan B, the numbers, sorry, I'll switch back. You can see Plan B, the numbers are higher. They aren't quite as high as we had originally forecasted. We were really looking at these year 1 and 2 numbers. And so, but they are higher than 208,000 over 2 years. So Pen 1, as in Plan A, will be required to seek outside support. And so we are talking to our partners about both of those 2 contingencies. I have a couple questions. I think that's the facts there. So
do you want to pause, Mark, and hear from James and Claudio? Okay. James, go ahead. You were first.
Great, thanks. Nice job. Very good presentation so far. Without going into a lot of detail, since it's 2 years out, years 3 and 4 of PED, is there an assumption that additional outside funding, such as state grant funds, would be used to offset the costs during those years as well?
Well, one of the assumptions that that goes into this is that we are hoping that the plans to consolidate the districts moves forward more quickly. But obviously, in the event, and so then we'll have more revenue means, different ways of financing that the last 2 years of PED. The other consideration is, yes, that we do believe that the state levy grant fund will still be a potential mechanism. We won't be able to apply for 2 million for 4 districts, but we would be able to apply for 2 million from the new district. Also, there's a bunch of other mechanisms that are at our disposal that were on that earlier graph. There are Business Oregon state levy loans as well, and they're very low interest. The reason we haven't really pushed forward with any kind of loan scenario is we want to minimize the amount of new debt service that we're recommending to the boards as we move towards consolidation. Okay, thanks. Claudio?
Yeah, no, really appreciate the presentation. Thank you. So I was wondering, I didn't quite hear, maybe didn't get the sort of the choice of the justification for the choice of this particular composite. It seems like it's a benefit, so benefits and costs. And what were the other composites that were out there, and what was the thinking around choosing this particular composite?
Yeah, like I said, I think this is the most straightforward. It's an even balance of costs versus benefits. And in this case, we used the project cost, or the PED cost would be 1/2 of the distribution or the allocation. And then economic benefits would be the other method. Some of the other composites that we have been talking about, we're diving further into nuance. I think they would have been harder to explain. They didn't quite arrive at, in some cases, significantly different numbers. But for instance, so some of us staff, myself included, even though we were pretty aware of how they came about, they were really difficult to explain even amongst ourselves. So in some cases, we looked at other metrics in terms of the distribution of overhead costs versus site-specific costs between the districts, and it didn't work. It didn't seem to have a substantial benefit or a great difference in numbers, and it was just extremely difficult to articulate to crowds like this, as well as to a more public audience.
Yeah, I guess I'm really excited about the possibility of the state grant, and I think I understand the reasoning behind the equal share. It seems like it's it's really if to get $1 million you got to kick in 200,000, you want to make sure that everybody's spending more or less about that. If that's kind of a good reframing of it, the reasoning for that allocation. Seeing head nods, I'll take that as yeah. But for and maybe we want to kind of keep considering Plan B. I don't know what the what the path is to a final decision on Plan B and when we need to pull the trigger on making that decision. But it does feel a little odd that for an overall project that has a preponderance of costs in Pen 1 that provide a preponderance of benefits in other districts, that we would choose something that kind of basically splits the difference. So I'm not entirely comfortable with this particular composite. I don't know how my fellow supervisors feel, but I think it does seem like whatever method we want to use should be very focused on where benefits fall for the project, and especially since not only do the costs fall heavily, but also disruption of businesses and the work of folks in Pen 1 fall most heavily here. So it feels a little odd to choose this one. So I don't know how other folks feel.
James, you want to go ahead? And then while you're actually, James, before you speak, one thing I just want to make really clear, and it sounds like at least Claudio and James, you get this, is that we're not asking you to choose between Plan A and Plan B. Plan B is a contingency if the grant funds don't come through. So that's, and then when we're done with answering these questions, Mark does have some information to share about the timing of a resolution, because we're asking for a resolution. And so that should get at your question, Claudio, about when we would need to button this up. James, go ahead.
Just quickly reiterating that I think what you have probably already heard and will continue to hear from City of Portland is that there are many decision points over the next couple of years, but we will continue to advocate for an economic benefits model for the reasons that Claudio mentioned, in terms of the lower risks in Pen 1, the huge land disruption. So obviously, I think just going forward, listening for that theme, you'll hear that from city staff, that we're going to be beating the economic benefits drum often.
Mr.
Say
Chair,
that again, James, you kind of trailed off at the end. I was hanging on to your words there. So we kind of would take the benefits and then your voice kind of trailed off. Help me at the end of your thought process there.
Just sorry, as we have discussions about methodologies, which I understand the option A, or whatever we're calling it. I know we're not choosing between A and B, but as we have further discussions about cost allocation methodologies, anything we're doing here, the city's current informal position is one of really pushing for economic benefit as a way of allocating costs.
Okay, thanks.
That's, that is good feedback. Obviously, we're we're working between the needs and the justifications for various districts, and an economic benefits model would be very advantageous to Penn One, as it would drive the contribution down to 9%. I think that I will restate there's a lot of confidence in Plan A. So of course, you don't come up with a contingency without considering its impacts, and so that is noted, and I have some discussions. I'll just answer to the decision-making question really quick in case it helps flavor any further comments. But we were hoping to ask for the approval of both plans, Plan A and Plan B. Obviously, assuming we can't assume that you would take our recommendations 100%. It's a staff recommendation, but we wanted to drive that conversation so that we could move forward with a high level of confidence that Plan A would kind of assuage a lot of concerns, and we can move on with a lot of the other business that we need to resolve as we hurtle towards PED. But I assume we'll have some sidebars, and I think everyone has information about what that economic benefits allocation looks like. So that maybe everyone can, if anyone needs, we can refer back to our memos on the different allocations. But I think we're still fairly confident as the staff and pushing for that. But we obviously, I think I've heard you loud and clear that we need to revisit that internally. Claudio?
Yeah, thanks. No, I'd love to continue to have conversation about that, and also maybe it's been a little while since we talked about some of the other composites. So while I recognize we're looking to get to something that is both fair and makes and gets us to the end, we're I think it would be good to sort of revisit the justifications for those, and regardless of the complexity, I think. Just you did say something that benefits would be more advantageous to Penn One. I do want to just really emphasize the point that it's not about advantage. It is really about us thinking that it is the most fair, in the sense that it is the benefits are what this project is being funded by the Corps on. It's what where those it is what we're paying for. We're paying for benefits, and so while I know that we're very likely to land somewhere else besides straight benefits, I would want to characterize it rather as any other decision would be disadvantageous to Penn One, not the other way around. I don't think we're looking for advantage. We're looking for something that more approximates where we think a fair situation would be. But happy to discuss it more. And I just wanted to sort of note that we're having a conversation about regional partners participation. I think that James and I, as being part of the larger city coordinating group, we're very, very active participants in that group, and know that we're working very much hand in hand with your team, and looking to get as favorable an understanding from council on these issues as possible. But ultimately, we don't know how much we can get out of them, and it would be a shame if we ended up not getting more, and it would sort of impact our ability to do things like match the grant for PIR, pump station, or anything like that, if we had to pick and choose where the scarce dollars we get from council went. So I just don't want to. I don't know that we can assume we can keep going to council for big numbers. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there as being one of my concerns, as just being a part of both the city conversation and the Penn One conversation.
Great. Well, that's all very helpful, and we really appreciate having some of these thoughts laid out here. So we have some more to discuss. I guess I see Annalisa Coolers.
Yeah, I have two questions for you, Mark, and thank you for this really great presentation. And it is really good news that hopefully we'll be successful with Business Oregon, and this Plan B is not something that we need to explore further. So thank you for everyone for their efforts on trying to put that levy fund to good use and seeing that across the finish line. I think two questions. One, I'm sorry, I did not actually hear when you guys wanted us to vote on this Plan B cost allocation. Is it this month, next
Thanks.
month? March?
Yeah, I cut myself off with that, with my answer after dangling it out there.
Yeah.
I think our hope was to put out a resolution in February to move forward with, again, to approve both plans in whatever form we land on. And then if we don't get the state levy grant, we'll have visibility on that later in the spring, early summer, and we can just shift gears.
And then I think my second question is, obviously this is a staff recommendation. If different districts advance different kind of Plan B, what happens?
We're hoping to make a compelling case for all districts to move forward with the same plan. Obviously, this doesn't work if we're on different foundations, and different allocation amounts. So
I think it's worth noting, similar to the Business Oregon Grant Administration and sort of the even split, is that we're receiving one invoice from the Army Corps of Engineers because this is one levy system and it's one project for them. And so that is how some of the accounting will work. But I think that's also why it's imperative that if there's a difference in even that Plan B, we're going to have to work it out. We can't advance multiple funding allocations because that would leave a gap. So we will need to reckon with that.
I would just pile on and say at some point, I mean, the feds don't care. They just need their money. And so I want to acknowledge the city of Portland's being super consistent in the way it's communicating about this. And for that, I am hugely grateful. Good job. We're talking to Mike Jordan too, but it truly is very helpful. And I think it's not lost on anyone in this meeting that the benefits position from the city of Portland is at odds with where the Sandy Drainage Improvement Company is. They prefer a project cost basis, which is, one of the reasons we're really pursuing these grants. But honestly, I think if we're unsuccessful on the grants, we're going to have some work to do to sit everyone down and figure out a way we're going to win these 2/3 of the cost of this project being paid for by the feds. And I'm confident that we'll get there. I want to reiterate too that in the out years, after this initial grant funds are expended, we hope to be able to have the voters of the new district vote to approve a capital bond that would cover the remainder of the costs. So that's the plan. We do need a reserve plan, and I think all of the boards are being responsible by contemplating what that might look like. So we look forward to continuing to work with all of you from the city to figure out the best case to make and get this investment made. And candidly, I think this creative tension that you guys are participating in is probably healthy overall for the new board and for all the boards as we work through this. So I'm comfortable with where we are and certainly appreciate the positions you guys have. And I think there's more conversation to be had among us, but with any luck, we're going to get those grants. We're going to get this done. So.
Thanks, Jim. I do agree that it's good to have this tension. It sort of wakes folks up and gets them speaking honestly to themselves about some of these issues and what is fair and consistent with their agency's policies, so that we don't get to the finish line and suddenly there's the record skips and folks realize that they hadn't considered it carefully.
And I know our port representative isn't here today, but I know the port's actively considering what they can contribute for Penn One's share, and I know Annalisa, you're working with your team at Metro to figure out what Metro can put in. And I am not a betting person, but my gut tells me that we will likely receive some form of contribution from Metro and the port. Obviously, we can't commit either of their governing bodies to anything, but indications are they recognize the importance of this near-term investment in the local share of PED. So again, I remain confident, but I think this is a really healthy conversation to have. So thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, so I think I'll kind of end this, unless folks have further questions, end it on the note that our recommendations have been clearly outlined. Obviously, it's everyone's prerogative to shift recommendations. We've vocalized, you know, the implications of shifting and the need for consistency between the districts. And I think I'll just still leave it on the table that we would like to have, would like to put forth for have a resolution signed in February. If that needs to be pushed back, we'll obviously it will if we're not comfortable with where we're at by then. But I think it's good to set a goal for signing at that point, and moving on with our other business at that point. Segueing, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie, speaking of other business, and put up our timeline as far as this whole process preparing for PED.
Thanks, Mark. So this chart should look familiar to all of you. It's this rainbow schedule that we've been showing you at every time we get together. And it's nice to see that the items in the summer and the fall are completed or, you know, well underway. So that's great. Here we are in the winter of 21-22. We've talked about, you know, we're at the point where we're making this funding options, you know, decision. So that's that top item in that column. The partner contributions and collaboration, you heard several updates about that, and those conversations are continuing. The betterments and the hazardous, toxic, radioactive waste conversations. Mark, do you want to just share a little bit about when folks will start to see anything about that?
Yeah, thanks. I think the betterments part of the discussion actually sort of that's centers primarily around that work is centered currently around just working with the Corps to get agreement to give us credit for design and construction work that's eligible, that we might need to proceed with ahead of the Corps project. There are no projects of that nature in Pen 1, so the HDRW is the more relevant. The hazardous, toxic, radioactive waste project is one to just look at the Corps' work through the begin an independent evaluation from our on-call consultant Apex to look at what the Corps' body of work consisted of and what they arrived at, make sure that there was nothing, no residual risk exists, or any areas that the Corps maybe wasn't aware of that they didn't consider with, you know, they had a fairly robust process. We talked about that last year, and once the contractor brings their completes their recommendations, we'll present them before the boards and see if there's any new insight on that. So that work, along with our real estate work and our advocacy work, are, I think, the big three prongs of work that we're engaging in as we move towards PED.
And then just to follow up on that, so immediate next steps that you can expect are, we're looking to bring a resolution forward at the February format. And so based on the conversations we're having with each of the district boards here in January, we'll take away that input, and there may be some follow-up discussions that need to occur on, you know, on that Plan B part of the resolution. So you can look forward to some further discussion around that. And then as Colin laid out, there's some work that's going to be happening to apply for the Business Oregon grant funds and to get that conditional approval so that we can include that information as a part of your budget process in the spring. And then just to tie a little bow on all of this, Mark had mentioned that we're looking at a fall decision around appropriations. Is that right, Mark? For the larger project? I think that's what Evan said in our previous.
A fall decision around appropriations. What we will be, yes, sorry, indirectly, we will be looking to sign the PED agreement in the fall, which will obligate us into that process. And we'll be obligated every year. We'll have to renew our commitment to the Corps each year. Yeah, so it's nice to see that we've got some imminent
outcomes here in this current calendar year, as opposed to previous conversations when we're looking so far ahead. So things are coming right up on top of us right now. So I think that's everything we've got to share. If there are any other questions, I know we've gone a little bit over time, Chair, so apologies for that. Looks like no other questions. All right, Mark, I think we're done.
Great. Thanks everyone for your attention, and we're always available for additional questions, but particularly if anyone wants to review those other methodologies. I think the July memo is pretty expansive, but happy to follow up.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Colin, as well. Jim, just want to do a quick time check. I think we're about 29 minutes behind schedule, which shows how great and interesting PED is. We definitely want to cover the financial forecast, which is item E. Emily, do you, my PIR pump station grant will take about a minute. Do we want to prioritize after the financial forecast, either the sponsorship criteria or the PIR pump station ownership? Or what's the time sensitivity around, or the sensitivity around those?
I think that the sponsorship criteria is something that's going to come back for consideration next month. So it'd be nice for Esther to at least give a brief overview. But then otherwise, I think, James, I can defer to you on those two items. Neither are like particularly time sensitive. So if the grant update is brief, we can tie that in at the end.
That sounds great. It sounds like we might need to just talk about the sponsorship criteria briefly, and the pump station ownership topic, maybe defer next time.
That works.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Ben, it's all yours. Financial forecast.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And James, can you share or see my screen? All right, I got a thumbs up from Jim. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, so just trying to arrange my screens here. Sorry for the delay. We're going to go over the budget calendar today, a brief review of our budget priorities. We'll have another chance to talk about year-end financials, but I think that we took care of that when we were discussing with Janet earlier in the meeting. And then we'll go into the district forecast. So when looking at the budget calendar, today, Tuesday the 18th, we're sharing the financial forecast. The staff will be required to submit their budget proposals by the end of February, and then we will be back before this board in April at the April 12th meeting, and then with a proposed budget, and then back again in May to approve the budget. However, we do plan to follow the same budget liaison process that we have in prior years, and Emily will be reaching out to your appointed liaison about 2 weeks for a meeting, about 2 weeks before this proposed budget, to review that information and collect any feedback. We presented the budget priorities in November, and these values that you see here on the left-hand side represent the most recent mission vision values that Evan shared with each board in November and December. And again, this is a very high level. In November, we shared more detail about each of these things, but just as a quick review, we're focusing on safety, stewardship, and equity as we go into developing the budget for 2022-23. And I'll be sure to include these priorities as we proceed with the budget development and presentations. We discussed the current year financials in the beginning of this meeting. I'll just point out that this is an approximation of the 2021 reserves year ending June 30, 2021, right at $100,000. And that's about 25% of our annual operating expenditures. So when we look at this forecast, there's several things going on here that I wanted to point out. This forecast assumes very modest annual assessment revenue increases, and that is commensurate with our historical growth and also the compression that we're experiencing in Penn 1. This forecast also assumes funding, fully funding the 5-year forecast of CIP through 2024. And it also assumes a 4% annual operating cost escalation. Now in 2023-24, this fiscal year, the district is scheduled to pay off its commercial loan, and that is equal to $67,000 in annual debt service. So you'll see that expense drop off the books off this forecast here. You'll also notice that the dramatic increase in revenue in the district from 2019 through 2021, that represents the city's contributions to the district that were absolutely needed and that we're extremely thankful for, like Jim started off the meeting with. And also you'll see the increase, somewhat reflective increase in expenses, in our operating expenses, and those reflect the task orders that the district is completing on behalf of BES and the revenue that we receive both from the city's general fund and BES to complete those task orders. So this Plan A does reflect the equal PED cost distribution, 25% for each district. And it also assumes receiving the $1 million grant from the state in 2022-23. And you'll see in this yellow color here, the district's contribution to PED costs. So in 2022-23, that would equal $115,000 approximately. And this forecast assumes that the district will pay that portion and also another $95,000 in 2023-24. Now you'll see the reserves, you'll see that expense coming from reserves and also paying for the CIP, the proposed capital improvement program, from reserves. You'll also notice that there's a dramatic decrease in revenues from 2023 on, and this is reflective of currently we don't have a solidified agreement with any partners to contribute to the district to pay for any additional PED costs or operating costs. And so that decrease in revenue reflects that that lack of current agreement, but it doesn't assume that we will receive any additional revenue from outside partners, whether that's MCDD or any of our other partners that are large, significant landowners within Penn 1. Now, if that were to change, if we do solidify an agreement with any of our partners, then this revenue forecast would change, and also this reserves forecast would change respectively. And also, I just wanted to point out that this forecast represents paying for our currently proposed capital improvement program, but in order to avoid fully depleting our reserves beyond 2023, we could change this forecast and delay or cancel any capital projects to avoid depleting our reserves completely. So hopefully I got all the dynamics there. I know that was a lot of information all at once. I do not have a forecast for Plan B because that it just represents a lot of unknown unknown dynamics. Basically, the plan B for Pen 1 would include reaching out to our partners or securing a loan, with having another partner back that loan. And once the district is dissolved and the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District is implemented, it would have to assume the debt service for that loan. But I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think that just Pen 1 could apply for and receive funding for a loan in its current financial situation, considering its compression and its lack of revenues to adequately provide that debt service on that loan for the PED costs. So I know I gave you a lot of things there, a lot of dynamics, but this is the only forecast that I have prepared for you today. And that concludes my material. And I'm happy to entertain any questions or comments.
Jeff.
Thank you. Good job, Ben. You know, the comment about reserves really resonated with me. You know, we've been talking about that for years, and you know, that no pun intended, rainy day fund. But you know, so I appreciate you acknowledging that. And then I also would agree with you, not reviewing any books, but just anecdotally, I would greatly agree with you that we would not be looked upon favorably based on our revenue source, at least as of today, taking a snapshot of for a loan. So all that said, I just wanted to confirm, I think you said something about, we could do this and not tap or put in reserves and not do any capital improvements. Did I hear that? And so my question is, if I heard you correctly, you said, we won't do any capital improvements. Does that mean any? I mean, none?
If I could rephrase
go ahead.
my statement, I guess what I meant to say is that we would have to adjust our current capital program so as to not fully deplete our reserves under this scenario. I just wanted to make sure. Actually, I won't say that. So in this scenario, if we were to receive the state levy grant, we would end fiscal year 2023. So that would be June 30, 2023. We would have approximately $130,000 in reserves remaining, and that represents about 90 days of operating expense under our current operating expenditures. So hopefully, Jeff, did I give you the clarification that you were looking for?
I appreciate that, and I apologize because words stick out with me, and readjust makes a lot more sense than we just won't do any. So thank you. That's a good statement.
Great, thanks, Jeff. I've got a few questions, probably more than we have time for. And Ben, thank you again. On the graph where it says 2022, that is fiscal year 2022-23. Is that correct?
That's correct. And it looks like I may have my numbers off 1 year. So I apologize for that.
That's okay. This may be a question you can't answer, and maybe something we need to handle at a future meeting or even a workshop, because this is a little different than what I was anticipating. Again, at a very high and conceptual level, kind of starting at the top and working our way down. The gray part, the capital part. My assumption was that BES was largely funding capital improvements related to the need, but that I may be incorrect with that. PED we've already talked about as an uncertainty. For next fiscal year, the city is through special appropriations putting in about $197,000, which is equal to or greater than the compression loss of city properties to Penn 1. And as I mentioned before, although we have not requested those for future years because we haven't reached that point in our budget process, we're tracking and anticipating the need to provide that level of funding, around $200,000, to deal with the compression loss, to avoid depleting. We had not anticipated restoring reserves, but making sure we don't dip into reserves anymore. So I'll just say I have a lot of finer grained questions, but this is a little different from where I thought we were headed. Can you speak to that at all?
I could, yeah. And thank you for bringing that up. And just for everyone else that is on the phone, James might have a more in-depth understanding of the funding dynamics and the flow of funding into the district. So we have two major revenue streams coming from the city, and Jeff alluded to one. So from the special appropriations from the general fund of the city of Portland, we have, like Jeff indicated, or I'm sorry, James indicated, $197,000 proposed coming into Penn 1 next fiscal year to fund operations. We have, and this chart reflects that, and that is sorely needed, like James indicated, from compression. There's another source of revenue coming from the city, specifically from the Bureau of Environmental Services, for specific items that MCDD staff are completing on behalf of BES. And some of those items are capital related items. So yes, that is also correct. I just wanted to differentiate for everybody on the call that there's these two sources of money coming from the city into Penn 1, funding for different purposes and funding different things. So yes, you are correct that there are some capital items in our capital program as it's currently constituted that BES is funding wholly or partially. And hopefully I got all the things that you're looking for there, James.
So I guess my one last question is the green line that really drops off in 20, kind of drops off after 22. If the city were to continue to fund the operations, that line would look different. Is that?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
And the reason I just wanted to show that green line reflected to reality, that we don't have solid commitment from our partners from the city to fund Penn 1 beyond 2023. That's not to say that they couldn't or that they won't. It's just to say I don't have any documentation to reflect that scenario.
Great, thank you, Ben. Other questions from board members? Okay, well, great. Well, thank you for the detail as well as the graph and the trend, and we'll look forward. I appreciate the budget calendar. That's very helpful as well. So I look forward to getting into the details of the planning for the budget, and as staff ever have a need, and board members, feel free to contact me, and we'll start to understand what the unmet needs are in terms of questions, so that as we move toward April, May for budget, a complete budget understanding and adoption, will be in a good position.
My pleasure, and thank you for your time.
Okay. Looks like we have about 11, 12 minutes left. Let's move on to sponsorship criteria. Astor.
Hi, my name is Aster Moulton. I've been with MCDD for about 5 months. I'm a public affairs and community relations specialist, here to give you an update about some proposed changes to our sponsorship program, and I will try to be as brief as possible. So I'll share my screen. Are you seeing a presentation, or did I share the wrong screen?
Yes.
You're seeing a presentation, great. Okay, so we've had a sponsorship program for about 5 years, and sponsorships are important for cultivating organizational partnerships, and as well as offering unique networking opportunities. And here to present some updates on our sponsorship program. So this briefing today will get you up to speed about our efforts to streamline what is funded in the events and sponsorships budget line item, as well as our recent efforts to bring more structure and transparency to how sponsorship related decisions are made. This is meant to be an introduction to the topic, answering any preliminary questions you have, and then we'll go into more detail and seek board approval on our overall direction next month. First thing to know about the events and sponsorships budget line item, it's small. Penn 1 doesn't have a budget this year, and the combined budget between all 4 districts is just over $33,000. It's historically included a lot of different types of projects and programs, including district hosted events, tabling event fees, educational partnerships, and traditional sponsorships. And as I mentioned, one thing we want to do is streamline what is funded in this budget line item. So we'll be removing things that are educational partnerships and tabling fees, so that what remained is just traditional sponsorships, where we support an organization's mission without any direct benefit outside of networking and marketing opportunities, as well as district hosted events. So we'll slim down this budget line item a little bit and recategorize things. But more importantly, we want to establish some criteria to how we decide what sponsorships we fund every year, bring some structure and transparency to that process. And given the size of the sponsorship program, we do want to have those decisions be made internally, but we'll look towards what a community advisory committee looks like in funding allocation as we move forward with the new district. So I'm not going to go over the proposed criteria in detail today, but here's a quick overview of what it is. It's on an 11-point scale. It considers geography, equity, flood education, operational relevancy, and the organization's relationship to the district, whether it's a new relationship or a continuing relationship. Each requesting organization will fill out a form, the questions of which will reflect this criteria. MCDD staff will take that form, give it a score on that 1 to 11 scale. And the higher the score, the greater potential funding. And if it's less than 5, then we would consider not funding. One process change that we are hoping to implement is that board members and staff would no longer be submitting sponsorship requests. Instead, if you're a part of an organization that would like to receive a sponsorship, we would ask that someone else from that organization fill out the form, so there's no appearance of conflict of interest there, and help mediate any power dynamics that have been happening previously. And so, yeah, the next step would be to review the specific criteria next month, as well as answer any questions you have today. Wow, got through that pretty fast. Yeah, thanks for having me, and happy to answer any questions you have right now.
Questions for Aster? I'll just add a comment for starters. Great presentation, very well done in a short period of time, very clear. Look forward to hearing more next, sounds like next month. And it sounds like the districts, the 4 districts will be asked to do a resolution or.
Yeah, that is true.
Great. I see this being helpful now and even more helpful as the new district, the consolidated district, has greater revenue generating ability, a greater presence in the community. So this is really fantastic work. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I just say, Esther, I don't know that they've presented to this board yet, but they've also done some really great work on the homeless coordination, and we're just really fortunate to have Esther on the team. So I don't get an opportunity to have her or have them at board meetings, so I want to thank them for all their great work. Thanks, Esther. Good job.
Thanks, Jim.
Great, thank you again. Moving down in the agenda, we're going to sort of skip items G and H, the PIR pump station updates. I'll just give about a 30-second update, which is Bill Owen and I are having conversations about making sure we understand the PIR pump station ownership and easements that would be needed as we hopefully start the PIR pump station rehabilitation design and permitting. That is a project that Brian Eberhardt and I are working on. City of Portland committed about $565,000. We're finalizing our submission to FEMA as a funder. As you may recall, we passed the first, it's not the pre-application, but it's a step before a pre-application, but it's not called a pre-application. So our project looks good. We're headed in the right direction. In the next couple of months, I think we'll bring this topic back to you with a status update. I do want to just give a great deal of personal thanks to Bill Owen, Brian Eberhardt, and Liz Edgar. Liz is the technical lead on the pump station, the stabilization effort now, and the design effort in the future. So staff have really been directing this and guiding this and keeping it on task. There's a lot of detail. So just very thankful for the staff's effort. With about 4 minutes left, I wanted to give Jim Medod probably the last word. Jim, do you want to give an executive director update?
Sure, I'll be really quick. First and foremost, I want to let you know that we've made some pretty good progress on staff safety and security. We've reached a pretty good set of agreements with our operations team. We have armed security escorting them to a few places. We continue to work with the City of Portland, the Port of Portland, Joint Office, and others. So we're seeing slow but steady progress in managing homeless camps and garbage and safety issues, and more work to be done, but we want to thank everybody for contributing, and we see all the agencies stepping up. And then most importantly, what I want to let folks know is we have an awesome new board coordinator who joined us just today. Her name is Wendy Lynn, and she's here on screen with us, and we're really excited. Wendy has experience most recently working as the Deputy Director of Business for a Better Portland, which is a pretty good progressive group of businesses trying to contribute to a better community here. She also has experience as an Executive Director of a not-for-profit working on community-based food issues down in the Ashland and Rogue Valley area. So she has a lot of experience working with boards, for boards, supporting boards, and is really good at best practice and super organized. And this will also allow us to shift some of Emily's awesome expertise over to helping us manage all things and coordinate all things related to starting up the new utility. So we're super excited to have Wendy join us today, and you'll be seeing more of her. And Wendy, did you want to say anything?
Hey, thanks, Jim. I just want to say hello to everyone. I really look forward to meeting you in person one year and getting to know you. Thanks so much.
And the last thing that I'm trying to tell all the legacy boards is that the revenue subcommittee of the urban board is working to narrow the revenue options that it will consider in modeling over the next few months. And the subcommittee made a recommendation last week that had a fairly split vote, I think is fair to say. And that vote involved a recommendation to the full board that's meeting in half an hour. Sorry, James, to consider the recommendation, but it would be to include a permanent property tax levy or a potential serial property tax levy for operations for the new district in the modeling exercise. Two things I want you to know, well, three. The first is, it's not a decision to use that as our revenue source. It is a decision to recommend to the full board that we model it. One. The full board will consider that today, and we'll make a decision, and we'll keep you posted on that. Second is that we do not currently have authority to use that tool. So we would need to go to the 2023 session of the legislature to seek amendments to our authorizing statute to obtain that authority. So it's not something that we could do in the near term. And then third, I wanted to let you know that the perceived split seemed to be along geographic lines, with most of the concerns coming from our East County board members. And their concern is really focused on compression and potential shifts of impact to folks outside of the higher taxing jurisdictions in the city. Well, it's the city of Portland, I'll just name it. And so I think there's some misunderstanding, more work to be done. I don't think this is something we can do in the near term, but because you may hear about it from people who know that you serve on one of these districts, I wanted to let you know. And we will endeavor to send out an update a little bit later once that board makes a final recommendation about what to include in the modeling. But again, we're a long way from a decision about which revenue source, and we're even a longer way away from being able to adopt a recommendation of a permanent property tax levy or even a serial levy for operating purposes. So I wanted you to know in case you heard about it. And I think with that, I'm going to stop because it's 12:29 or 2:29.
Great. Thank you, Jim. As always, thank you to the board members. Thank you to the staff for being here today. Wendy, welcome on aboard. If you haven't heard the rumor, apparently Penn 1 is the favorite board. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard that. So we look forward to working with you. And with that, everybody, sorry we did not get through the whole agenda, but we had some pretty meaty topics to talk about, and we will get to the other topics later. Have a great week. Happy New Year, and we'll talk soon.
Bye.